welcome to today's Authentic Achievements episode, where I'm delighted to be joined by the fabulous Eric Lazar. Eric, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Hello.
I'm so looking forward to this conversation. But before we get into it, let me share with our audience a little bit more about you. So Eric's the owner of SpeedPro Chicago Loop, which is a large format digital printing company which specializes in custom graphics for corporate offices, retailers, and trade show space. Is a respected thought leader within the industry with many articles to his name, and his award-winning company has been distinguished as the International Franchise Association's Franchise of the Year. It's been in Inc. magazine's 2023 list of the fastest growing companies in the Midwest, including a slot on the top 150 list of largest printing companies in North America in 2024. And Eric's also a US Marine Corps veteran, where he served as an intelligence specialist. What an amazing journey you've had. I'm really excited to learn more. So can you tell me a bit about your journey to where you are today, please?
It's been, I think, a lot of stops and starts. Probably the biggest, most formative one, as you mentioned, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I think that really set the baseline and made me who I am, changed who I was, is absolutely a part of my DNA. I think the second part was probably my time in television. Used to, run sales for several TV stations throughout the Midwest, and worked in television ad sales for a number of years as, both as a salesperson and as leadership. And I think that was one phase. And then, really it was my second foray into entrepreneurship, when I left television and started a business in mobile marketing. And then it's been what I'm doing now with SpeedPro. So there are a couple of different things that I look at them as very separate components and parts of the life cycle. While they blended into each other, they are distinctly different experiences.
Yeah, I love that. I think so often life is a bit like that, isn't it? Where you have, I guess it always reminds me a little bit of the Green Mile film, because that was originally 6 books. That was the first time Stephen King had done it in that way, and each book stood up on its own, but you put them all together and it made even more sense. And I guess that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? With life, is each part made in of itself total sense and was a compartment, but they build on each other, and you build on the character that you become as a result of them.
Unbelievable. Because I wouldn't even say that they were different chapters. Is like I look upon that, and it's, I think sometimes it's a little sad that I distinguish myself by the jobs that I had or what I was doing at that point. But I think they also, my personality shifted, or it shifted my personality, depending on what role I was filling and what I was doing. And so I look at them as very distinct parts of my life, and they probably could stand on its own. It's pre-TV, post-TV, pre-SpeedPro, post-SpeedPro, and certainly, pre and post-Marine Corps.
Yeah, I bet that was, I imagine that was a definite changer of kind of who you were and how you were, because that's got to be a particularly unique situation, I guess, you're doing, particularly doing the role that you were doing there.
Yeah, and I think you adjust, you adopt based on, one, your age, to the responsibilities and the authority that you're carrying with you at that time. So there are a few different things, and then the wisdom you've gained. So who you are at the beginning of the journey is definitely not who you are at the end of the journey, despite the other two factors.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, I guess that's often with a lot of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where we end up isn't where we start, but as they say, life is the journey, not the destination, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I would agree.
It's making sure that we take the right parts of it with us into the next bit of our journey, isn't it? And leave behind the bits that we no longer need, that no longer serve us. So when you've made, as you say, 4 real transitions in your life, what would you say has been the greatest lesson you've learned in making those changes?
Oh, the greatest lesson that I've learned, I think it all depends. And whether you're looking at business or not, is like, if I'm looking at, certainly if I look at the Marine Corps, which I think is the first one, it was about leadership and what I believed to be good leadership, or what I held in high esteem. It was also very different than actually what the truth was and how to be a leader. And I look at myself at that point as being a terrible leader. I was the worst I had ever been. I understood the skill sets, but I interpreted them to be something different. It was sort of, of this very aggressive, very, the bravado, the intimidation is what you picture of, sort of the quintessential Marine Corps drill instructor, and wanting to be that. And when I had the opportunity was to treat people in that manner. And the lesson I learned is when somebody who was a bit senior to me, we had gone to the Philippines for a period of time, had taken me aside, and just a few weeks before we had gone to the Philippines, and told me, he's like, Eric, he's like, and that time, it was Corporal Lazar. When you get off base, these guys are going to beat you up. Like, you may not come back. You really need to straighten it up. And with some very, very strong words, is you have alienated everybody. They absolutely can't stand you. And I was at a rank that I wasn't untouchable by any stretch of the imagination. It's like, I was just, I was a young punk kid that had, some authority. And that was actually very scary. And that was the first time that I really had to wake up to the impact of what my leadership style or skills, could invoke. So that was certainly impactful. And I think the next impactful thing was probably in that era. And this is the one that's probably carried with me the longest, was watching my dad die. And not to be sad, but it was, he was a school principal, young guy, 53. And I never really understood him nor his way of leadership. He was definitely, walk soft and carry a big stick. And at that time I was in the Marine Corps, and again, sort of as I explained, I understood leadership to be very different, is that it's by brute force and it's dictatorial. And I never really understood him as a school principal, and seeing some of what I thought was the abuse he would take, and that he was not just putting his foot down. But he was much smarter and much more delicate in his leadership style, and as a result, much more effective. And to see the people that came out for his funeral that were 2,500, 3,000, 4,000 people. I mean, it was just huge. It was, standing room only. And it was really who came out were people that, when he was a camp counselor in his teens and his 20s, kids that, this is 30 years ago, or students from 30 years ago. And this was well before the day of social media. This is when you were reading obituaries in the newspaper. Had all come out and had written letters about the impact that he had. And that really it was much more about leadership. It was about the impact and the legacy that I wanted to lead in life. And I think that really changed who I was and who I wanted to be as a leader. Is that was somebody that I wanted to emulate, that I wanted people, whatever, 30 years from now saying, oh, I used to work for this guy. I was friends with this guy, or just this guy helped or did or whatever. And they would remember those stories and they would pass them on to their child. Because even today, people that I didn't know as, back then, I'm friends with on Facebook. People, students that he had impacted are, still connecting me. And as early as, last week, they sent me a T-shirt, or sent me a photograph of a T-shirt from back when he was a junior high school principal. So it's amazing. And that's I think those are the two things that were probably most impacted me.
Oh, wow. Your dad sounds like he was an amazing man and clearly left a massive legacy and an impact. And that shows through in what you're now trying to do, which is being more conscious of what legacy you want to lead. Would that be fair?
Oh, 100%. It's probably how I lead my life. If you know, and it's funny. I never see. My dad was 53. I mean, a young guy, but I never looked back upon his life as being tragic. And I know that it's a very self-centered way of looking at it, because because I gained so much from his death. I gained more from his death, unfortunately, than I think I would have gained from him being alive. And it sounds really weird, and I know that it doesn't read real well, but there's something in there, is that I think in his sacrifice and in his passing, that I grew so much more as a result, which I don't know if I would have appreciated him or had the benefit of those gains, just carry on his legacy, and a legacy that I never really understood, appreciated, or liked as he was, when he was alive. It's sort of strange. It really wasn't until, maybe the few weeks leading up to it and the weeks in his passing that I really understood the strength of his character and what I wanted to be.
I think sometimes when people do lead with kindness and with empathy, we can dismiss that as being weak, and yet actually it takes more courage to lead that way than to lead in a more authoritarian.
Right.
You do this because I've got the title that says so, and I think sometimes we can misinterpret that, can't we, as weakness, when in actual fact there's real strength and depth of character that, when you really have some time to reflect and look at it, comes to light.
Oh, I would totally agree with you. It's, it was something that I certainly wasn't comfortable with, in my teens or really as a young adult. And I wouldn't even say that I fully appreciated it or adopted it right away at 21. It struck me. I mean, I think anybody that was there was awestruck. But it probably still took me a couple of years to really absorb the importance of what happened there.
Yeah.
What that meant, and the, truly understanding the generations of people that he impacted, and that his legacy did live on, that there was a little bit of his DNA in everybody that he touched. And boy, I don't know, that sort of that ability to live on forever. And, with that, people really wanted to sort of take your soul forward, carry it on for the rest of their lives, and impart that to their children. I mean, that's incredibly powerful. And I don't mean that in, I know that can be interpreted sort of weird also, is a little bit cultish, but it's like, wow, that you can really have that effect, because you always think that you're just here for a moment. And I feel, it's like, it's really cool to truly see somebody, to see their goodness live on.
It must be an amazing thing to have seen. And you're right. I think sometimes we do think that we're here for a moment, but the impact we have can be so much greater than that.
Right.
Both positive and negative.
100%.
If we are driving from a positive legacy, then that ripple effect, it can be amazing. And it always strikes me as well that to remind myself of that it can be equally bad if you've come at it not from a position of trying to add value. And making sure in every moment I'm trying to be really conscious of how I'm being and leading in the kindest way I possibly can.
Right.
Hopefully ensure that the ripple effect is a good one. But to know that your father impacts not just you and your family, but all those other families and their ongoing generations, because we pass those kind of learnings and stories on, don't we? We pass on the things that impacted us and made us feel something more deeply. to the people that we love and care about, and they will get passed on for generations to come, I'm sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I got to imagine that there's, somewhere somebody that has integrated one of his practices, into their daily routine, whatever it might be. I know for sure. There's a lot of me in him, and I think it does, it does good. Maybe it's just, sort of my humor and how I treat my coworkers, how I interact with them, is that he was a big teaser. He was a big joker. And I watched that, and I watched how, teachers, staff members, kids interacted with him. I think it's something that's passed on. It may have been passed on regardless or not if I had this appreciation for him, and just, that's a personality trait that's more nurture than, or that's more nature than nurture. But I think I am conscious of how that worked for him. I think that there are things, and I'm sure there are other people like that. It's like, oh yeah, Larry Lazar used to do this, and I feel comfortable doing it as well, and it worked for him, and I would trust that. I'd like to think that.
I'm sure it did, and I think one of the biggest gifts I think that we can give people is belief, and it sounds like that's something that your father did for the people around him. He gave them his belief in them so that they could use that to add to their own and give themselves the courage to take that next step. Would that seem fair?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was his thing. Is he loved the underdog kids. So yeah. That was his favorite thing. It's the kids that were doing great. I think he was wonderful with them. But the stories that I used to hear as a student were the underdog kids.
Yeah.
That's who really lit up his heart, and to see them be successful, and their challenges were greater, their successes were smaller, but the successes meant a whole lot more.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I think you're right. It's that they're the ones that really need the belief.
Yeah,
because that's often the thing that they're not given, and therefore we can head them down the wrong path, can't you? But somebody like your father stepping in will have really changed that trajectory for them, and that impact will be ongoing and everlasting. Right. And we always remember the people, don't we, that impacted us positively. I think it was Maya Angelou who said that one thing she's learned is people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that one always resonated with me, which is actually a good thing to remember, that they're always going to remember how you made them feel, and therefore try and make that a positive feeling, and hopefully everything else will go well.
Oh, 100%. I could certainly think back to a number of people that, I'm not even sure they remember me. And I think it was the fact that, there was such a big difference. Again, just easy reference point is the Marine Corps. They might not remember me just because there was such a big sweeping difference in our ranks and our experience. But boy, do I remember them to this day. Is because they did something, what I thought was uniquely special, or they had a much bigger impact on my life than I think they would give themselves credit for. And so much so that even when the opportunity comes up, it's like, everybody's connected again on LinkedIn or Facebook. I do take the opportunity to say, hey, you might remember 37 years ago, I won, that whatever happened, or maybe it wasn't anything specific, but you really impacted my life, and I want to thank you as I celebrate this year, being whatever, 35, 36, 37, 38 years out of the Marine Corps, is what an impact you made during that time, where I just don't think they could have possibly appreciated. I was one of many Marines that they had in their charge.
I love that.
It makes a big difference.
And that makes a really massive difference then, that you took the time to reach out and tell them, to let them know.
I think it's important. I think people, as you get towards the tail end of your life, is sort of like, I think for me, it's that midlife crisis of being in mid 50s. These guys are certainly older, probably, between 60 and 70, you know, and not to be an ageist, but certainly the time on the earth is less, and at, you know, and probably in terms, many of their good years in terms of the ability to have an impact, they are probably looking at as, you know, as being gone. I think it's important to have that reaffirmation. And I say, and part of what I say is that, you know, if you ever question whether you impacted somebody's life, I want to let you know that you did, and I appreciate what you did. You know, it's like that is very much part of like that. That's the note that I send to a couple of people every year, and you know, it's like you need to know that you made an impact, and I remember it, and I want to thank you, and never question whether your time here was important or if you know if you made a difference. I don't, you know, I think it's I appreciate it. So it's like, I feel like I'm compelled to say it.
I love that you take the time. And actually what's striking me is that you're doing for those people almost what the people that came to your father's funeral and reach out to you are doing. You're not just telling them thank you, you're giving them something to share with their families about the impact they had, and the lessons that that their children can learn as well, which is a real gift.
It's, I think you're 100% right in your assessment. I mean, that's, you know, obviously that wasn't what I directly learned from that. I mean, there wasn't any, but it was, I think, taking the letters and what people said, and I think it was unfortunate. And I believe my dad knew it, because I'm sure there were people that said it to him while he was living. I just think it's so much more important to say while they're living than to their family when they're dead.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give these people that benefit, because I think they were all equally important in that respect. And some, you know, certainly some more than others, but I remember them, you know, and I remember looking up to them and saying, I want to be, you know, like Terry, or I want to be like Frank, or I want to be like Len. I mean, there were those guys that I was like, God, that's who I aspire to be. And now when the opportunity comes up, it's, you know, I want to make sure that I'm telling them that they, you know, and they've done great things and have wonderful credentials, and they don't need me to tell them, but I do think it makes a difference. And, you know, because those might be business credentials that they've gone on to get. They may have had plenty of military awards, but I think there's something different. You know, it's something as simple as what I'm sharing, and maybe not. Maybe it just makes me feel good. I don't know.
I think it's a lovely thing that you're doing, and I think it's, you know, it's nice to when people tell you about something where you impacted them for a positive. Because we can tell ourselves, well, they don't need to hear it from me. Well, they don't need to, but they might like to, because it's nice to know that we all have those moments of doubt, don't we, where we worry that we haven't been impactful enough, or we haven't made a big enough difference. So when people do take the time to come and tell you about something that you did, it's always nice to hear, isn't it? It's always a blessing. And one of the things I try and do with my little girl is, you know, if we see something and, you know, we think, for example, if someone's looking particularly nice or has done something kind, we always go over and share the feedback, because it's like, we've stopped doing that. We've stopped going over and telling people, and isn't it lovely when somebody does just put that smile on your face for 5 minutes, and it makes your day and everybody you interact with have a much better day as well, if you're coming at it from a positive space. And I think having that gratitude for the what you've learned from them, but having it and sharing it back with them feels to me almost like returning the gift in your own, because you gave me the gift of allowing me to learn this, and I'm giving you the gift of letting you know I learned it, and that it impacted me, and it was helpful, and it's helped, you know, shape where I'm going. I think that's a lovely thing to do, and I think a lot of the time we don't do it. We don't take that step. We think about it, but the fact that you actually don't just think about it, but do it, go and have those conversations, I think talks to the legacy you're leading.
thank you, and I'm striving for it. And it's funny. It's like I've done a lot of mentoring over, probably more in the last 15 years than ever before. And maybe it was just a matter of having the credentials, the maturity, to be able to do that. And I always tried to be helpful, but I think maybe my impact is so much that it's so much more now that I've just hit later stages in my career. So let's say post 40 is, and even as recently, it's like there are people that have come back to me and have said like, oh, this conversation made so much of a difference, or do you remember when? I can't even remember. Like, and I would never, like, these are not, and it's sort of like when I think it's like when I look at some of the guys that I was thanking, it's like, I think it was just part of their nature. It was, simply just that, that was the, what they thought they were expected to do, or it was just, again, it was part of their nature, course of, just the course of their job. And, it's now as these guys are coming back, and these guys and gals are coming back and like, do you remember helping me, do this, or, your words then? I don't have a retention for it, but their level of appreciation and the impact that they say I had is really unbelievable. And like, that just warms my heart. I mean, back in November, there was a guy that wanted to, sort of begin getting into, also a Marine, finances, but really wanted to take it down an entrepreneurial path. And he came up for one of the annual Marine Corps balls that I work on. And he took me aside and he started telling me about all of his success and the money that he's making and the team that he's building. And, he was saying, I don't know if you remember us going out and you sitting with me and giving me all these, tidbits and really helping me formulate this plan. And honestly, I didn't remember any of it. Like, I knew the guy, I remember talking to him, but I don't really remember sharing any, incredible, I don't know, nuggets of knowledge that would have, changed his life, that would have created this paradigm shift in his world. But evidently it was there. And I literally found myself at this party in tears. Like, yeah. I can't believe, like, this is wonderful. But yeah, it's like that to me, it's like, all right, it's like, I'm doing the right thing. It's like, that's the best affirmation, and the greatest source of energy that I get. And it's just, I think it's a result of, being authentic, having integrity, and really giving a crap about people.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing difficult. I mean, I think anybody can do it.
No, I completely agree. But I think sometimes we don't value highly enough the things that come to us for free. So being kind to people, giving them our time, being authentically ourselves, we can do for free. Right. And therefore, we often don't value it as highly as something that costs us a lot of money. But and I wonder whether, maybe it's my midlife crisis as well. As I've got older, that has become so much more apparent to me that the thing that I value more is authenticity, is kindness. It's more than anything anybody could give me. If they give me their authentic self, then that is a gift, and I appreciate that. But that must have been an amazing moment when they were sharing the impact that you'd had. So I can imagine I would have equally found myself in floods of tears if I'd been there, because it's lovely to know that you've had such a positive impact and that it's made a difference to somebody.
Yeah, and I don't know how. I mean, certainly I strive to have that positive impact as much as I possibly can. I know I fail often also. It's like those are the things that I am least proud about, but I'm aware that I have the ability to revert back to what I'd like to, as Eric 1.0. I try to avoid that, but there's a natural inclination, and I go back there, but it's I try to be the new and improved version, which I think I've probably been for certainly the better part of 15 years. And again, it's like, we got our faults, and we cycle back there. It's, it is a familiar place. Not that I like it, but I go back there. But yeah, it's like, that's who I hope to be. And, I don't know how many more people I'll be able to impact. It's like, if I, I think I've touched enough people, and some in a more dramatic way than other. But I think day to day, it's like just my team. It's like, if that was one of the reasons I wanted to have a business, was because I wanted to provide, a safe, healthy environment, not for anyone in particular, but for anybody who was going to be basically in my charge, in my care, that I could help. That might be the end of it. It might be the 3 or 4 or 5 people that work for me, but that's fine. It's like, those are 3 or 4 or 5 people that hopefully, like, I provided them a really great experience that they can look back on, and, they were paid a wage that was fair, that allowed them the freedoms to do things for themselves or their family, that they learned, they learned, not necessarily a new skill, but, a new way of interacting, where they felt healthy about their time there, that I was, my business partner and I were able to alleviate stress, but it was different than going to another job, that we gave them a unique enough experience that it was positively memorable. And that may be all that I impact for the rest of my life, but that's fine also. It's like, I don't think I have any expectations of, being, Schindler and, 1,200 families is, that might be, a little, aggressive to think that, but, in my own little way, it's like, yeah, if I can have just a sufficient positive impact on a couple of people along the way, great. And we should all strive for that in whatever way we can. We don't all own businesses, but we're leaders in different ways. It's, how do you treat your family? How do you treat your friends? Sort of do unto others, is, pay it forward, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's all leadership. So
true. And we lead in so many different aspects of our life, even if we're not per se the leader in
right.
that situation.
And,
I always say to my little girl that you're always the leader of yourself as well.
Right.
So you get to set the right expectations for yourself and hold yourself to account. And you're right. We are perfectly imperfect, and we will go and we will get things wrong. But I think it's not the mistake that defines us. It's what we do about it. It's whether or not we recognize, oh, look, I circled back. I best stop and head back where I want to, because that's going to be how we grow, isn't it? And if we can impact, I always thought, if I can impact just one person positively every day, then that's a good day. That's a day that I can be proud of. And if I can do more than that, even better. But if I start small, at least you're giving yourself something you can achieve.
Right. And I think, you do it very consciously, and you take, I think, greater risks than I would be comfortable with. And maybe that's, not to sound sexist, but I think maybe you're afforded some liberties as a woman to maybe say something to somebody that you don't know, where they're not going to see it as a threat, where, and there are times that I get in the elevator and I see somebody that is like, oh man, it's like, I love those shoes, or I love that outfit. Or, like, I think if I was to say, what's that perfume, that might get to the point that it's like slightly creepy. It's like, I don't know if I go there, but it's like, I really want to ask you. It's like, oh my God, that smells so good. So, I'm a little more cautious. I'm a little more cautious with that, but like, it's in my heart. Like in our previous conversations, like, going up to somebody and saying, I love that outfit. I would love to be able to do that without getting smacked or somebody thinking I'm a creeper. But I think that's terrific, because when somebody does that for me, it lights my day up. Like, I feel really good. It's like, wow. It's like, it's like, I still look good to somebody. It's like, I just feel like I'm going gray and I'm bald and my skin's wrinkly. It's like, I didn't realize anybody could find me attractive any longer.
Bless you. That's not true. But I think you're right. Sometimes we do hold ourselves back from that, that fear of like, how's the person going to respond?
Right.
I spent many years joking that I'd got hairdresser face because people will tell me anything, and I started off as a hairdresser. But then I realized actually it's probably because if I see that somebody's not looking happy, I'll do my best to make them smile. Because it's really hard to stay unhappy when someone makes you smile. So it's like, if that's all I can achieve, is I'll make you smile, and that might just make today a little bit better. And the amount of people that I now have as friends that was because when I saw them, they were having a really bad day on a train. And I was like, I could leave them to their really bad day, or I could interact and see if I can make it better. And it's amazing where those friendships come up from, isn't it? If they started from a place of trying to leave things better than we found them. Eric, it's been an absolute delight to chat to you, as it always is. I can't believe time's just flown. There with us one last piece of advice.
Yeah.
If you go back and give your younger self a lesson that you learned later on, what would it be?
I feel like I've already said it, and it seems so corny because it's in the title of your show, but I think it's truly about authenticity. I became so much better when I dropped the bravado and allowed myself to be vulnerable. And so it's I think it's two-part. It's being authentic. Is so much of my life was caught up in trying to be the image of something that I don't know, I thought would be respected, but it wasn't true to who I was. And I always felt like I was an actor, dressed up as someone else. Is being authentic. And I think the vulnerability is when I got comfortable with it, and it's very difficult to be vulnerable. That's not hard. And that has its own emotional stresses, because you are sort of walking around without a shield. But people appreciate it. I think both I don't like to use I've not found a really great word for subordinates, but whether it's the people that you're leading or the people that are, that you're serving, is when they see that you're vulnerable and that you're open and that you're, willing to discuss your faults and the opportunities to change, to move, to pivot. I think there's a greater appreciation, and that they can see that you have the ability to be sad. I think that made such a difference in terms of how everybody around me responded. And when I first started getting comfortable with it, and I think it was probably around 2019 that I started, late 2018, late 2019, that I really started getting comfortable with it myself. It was like a rush of emotions, and it may have been too much. It's like I just sort of like I opened the gate, here I am, and I don't know if everybody was quite ready for that. So, maybe I don't know. I think everything had been it had built up for so long that it needed somewhere to rush to. But after I got the flow of that vulnerability and the requisite emotions under control, I think people enjoyed being with me more.
Yeah.
I think there was certainly from my team, I think they appreciated me more. I think there was a comfort that they had, that they could talk to me about, and anything and everything, which I'm not really quite sure every leader is comfortable with that. Some leaders just like, nope, keep your private shit at home and we're not talking about it. Me, I don't know. We're small and we're intimate, and that's what I hope we can do. And, without treading on any HR lines. But yeah, I think it's the authenticity and I think it's the vulnerability. Those are the, like, I wish I had been more honest with myself and more honest about myself with others when I was younger. Although I don't know if I would have had the emotional maturity to do that at that time. So maybe it's just like the youth is wasted on the young. I don't know if I would have been able to. I don't know if I would have had the maturity to allow myself to be authentic, to allow myself to have been vulnerable at a younger. I don't think I was that evolved. So it's hard to say.
But it is great advice about being authentically you, and I think it is hard. As we were younger, you're desperately trying to fit in to what you think is expected, and I think with social media that's even worse. We look at these seemingly perfect views of everybody else's life and look at the messy reality of our own and find it sadly lacking. But I always try and say to Scarlett, you've got to be willing to dance your own dance. And do it your way and not worry, because actually when you get to my age or older, you suddenly realize that that's the bit you wish you'd done sooner. You wish you'd taken that leap of faith in being who you were meant to be earlier as best you can. And I think as long as we get there, I guess it doesn't matter when we get there, but doing it as soon as you can is really the game.
Yeah, getting there is when you can. It's like, that's nice, and that's the goal. And maybe certainly it takes some people longer to run the race, but boy, I wish I had found it earlier, and I wish I had the sense of peace that I do now. And not that there's not things that are unsettled in my life, but I wish I had found my core and embraced it earlier. Than now. It's like I feel like there may have been a few years. You never say wasted, because you grow during that. Hopefully you're growing during that time anyway, and maybe it just took me longer to grow, and that's why I am where now. But I wish I had, I wish that path was a little bit shorter, and I got to the place that I am now. That I think there were probably a few years in between that I could have used it, but maybe it was only because of what I went through during those years that I got to where I am now. It's hard to differentiate, what was part of the journey, and what was sort of the excess, side road. I don't know, but no,
but I think that is it, isn't it? As we go through life and we evolve, these things come into view more often. I mean, and I always think if you don't learn the lesson, life repeats it for you until you do. I had to repeat a few lessons a few too many times until I learned them. So I totally get that. There's sometimes you kind of think, could I not have got there a bit faster? Did I really have to go through the lesson 3 times before I worked out what it was that I was supposed to learn and grow?
Right.
I think you're right. We, as long as we're all learning and we're growing and we're trying to be, as I said, Scarlett, the only goal that you need to have is to be the best version of yourself and to be a better version of yourself today than you were yesterday. Right. And that you do that, and that's success, because that's going to give you peace and harmony and gratitude and appreciation for things. Whereas if you start trying to be like everybody else, they're already taken.
Yeah.
They're already them. They don't need a kind of copycat of them. But there's only one you. So be the best you that you can be, and hopefully that will make life easier.
Agreed. 100%.
It's been an absolute delight, Eric.
Oh, all mine.
Very much. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, as I always do. I look forward to our next conversation, and I'll make sure that how to get in touch with you is included in the notes below. Until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.